Now let us turn to some of the questions that have been brought up in the Q&A box. And if there are any extra questions that you would like to direct to someone on specific, please please do so. And also you'll see the live poll button. If you can click on it and let us know your thoughts about a few things that have been live today, that would really be appreciated. Let me just quickly go to the live Q&A. Okay, this one is addressed to Andrew. In the academic world, how has networking been for you in Qatar compared to growing up in Sydney?
There we go. Hello. Thank you so much for the question. Networking as an academic generally is, I think, maybe easier than conventional networking in industry because you're not seen as selling anything really. You're just looking for engagement with your counterpart. And it's a bit mysterious or unknown what academics do to outsiders. So there's always a sense of intrigue, which is good for building a relationship, something to talk about. In Qatar, compared to Sydney, I'll just start with Sydney. Sydney is very cliquey, actually. It's people have established networks and they're busy and they maybe don't have time to build new relationships as much as they do in a place like Doha, where expats in particular are transient. And so, in a sense, networking is a bit more honest in this part of the world because everyone knows that we're in the same boat. And so you see how you can help each other. Whereas in Sydney, it's hard to break those networks. And there was a study recently that said Sydney is one of the hardest places to break into social circles. And in fact, to be honest, meeting Sydney-siders here from the eastern suburbs of Sydney has been just as exotic for me growing up in the western suburbs as meeting someone from Syria. They're like different worlds. So that's been very eye-opening. But in this part of the world, particularly in Doha, talking about football is an entry point into business, into social issues, into the law. And being a football fanatic myself, that's been a great way over the last 7 years to kick up conversations and talk to people. And being an academic, I suppose I can be a little bit more frank in what I say and a bit more objective. And I'm going to talk about what I've observed with the language used around kind of inter-organizational politics and relations. And you often hear the word mafia used. It's the Australian mafia or the Jordanian mafia or the American mafia. And what that refers to is like sometimes there's a sense that people within an organization will help others who have the same background as them. And that I've observed it to a limited degree in some organizations, but I often hear that perspective being expressed. That doesn't mean you can't engage with people if they're from different backgrounds. In fact, it's quite the opposite. People, in my experience, have been very open and very willing to engage with Qatar University on a whole host of different initiatives and matters.
Thanks so much, Andrew, for that one. We have a question that is regarding a bit of healthcare and nursing here. I don't know, maybe Angie or Matan would like to pick that one up. So a question from Abdullah is, as an Arab or Kuwaiti student studying nursing in Australia, how can we work or teach in Australia, given that there are some differences in the licensing and certification requirements? Angie, would you like to take that one?
Madden, go ahead and I'll follow up with what you were saying. I just want to read the question again.
Okay, so in terms of professional regulation, I think it's a very interesting question and an issue that you have raised. So different healthcare groups, they have different professional regulations, and when it comes to international licensing requirements, when it comes to certification, there's a whole gamut of issues that we're actually currently trying to address. And it's not just for nursing. When you start looking into doctors, when you start looking at dentists, allied health professionals, there are requirements when it comes to meeting these regulations. And some professions, they require more in-depth examinations and assessments. It would be also dependent on where you actually study as well. And it would be also dependent on level of qualifications. Some professions, for example, medicine and dentistry, they actually have a more sort of a specialist entry, but still it's these primary qualifications, what you actually possess as a bachelor's degree, and from which country it is, that really matters. Here in Australia, we have mutual licensing for few countries, and that's New Zealand, UK, Ireland, and Canada mostly. So these countries have a similar historical proximity as compared to Australia and our educational systems. But having said that, the issue of licensing, international regulation, it's constantly changing. And in terms of international movement, there are other parameters, such as professional movement of health professionals, and also mutual recognition. It's getting more and more important. For example, if you look into the European Union, the professional qualifications are recognized across the countries, and you could move quite freely. And this is emerging also in the Gulf Cooperative Council environment as well, and also in ASEAN. So there is considerable variation and a number of issues when it comes to health professional regulation. But having said that, in terms of the nursing profession, it is sort of a very high demand profession here in Australia, as well as in many countries. And Australia is competing for migrant nurses as are any other countries. But that doesn't, so there are avenues in terms of rural and remote practice, and also where you could actually work in aged care. But there are some requirements that needs to be met, and there is no going the alternate way around for this, for meeting these requirements. But there are avenues for added support in terms of training to actually meet these requirements, in terms of what you need to do to qualify for these educational examination, for these licensing examinations. So that's available in terms of support provided.
Great, thank you so much, Madan. Angie, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you very much, Madan. Madan went to a lot of details about many of the different pathways and avenues. I'd just like to add and reconfirm that the primary degree and the country where you have your primary degree from influences the pathway that you're going to be taking. And if you already have some tertiary degree or specialization from home country, that also influences the pathway. But having studied some tertiary education in Australia, there are bridging programs and there are multiple pathways and avenues that you can consider. So it's definitely worth exploring if you want to pursue a future career here in Australia in nursing, for example.
Great. Thanks so much, Angie. There is one question to Rosemary, who is in the audience. If I can get you to type your response in the Q&A box, that will be appreciated. So this is something about one of the book chapters for the International Trade book. You're planning to co-write a chapter on charities looking at Aust-MENA comparisons. Do you think there's value in Australian and MENA region charity lawyers networking with each other? If you can write that in the chat and I'll be able to read your answer afterwards. Tanya, there's an interesting question to you. How does artificial intelligence play a role in networking in the current era, especially in the law discipline between both regions?
Well, I was fascinated to hear Jonathan's comments about the use of LinkedIn as a platform for finding jobs. So I want to talk here about search engine optimization. And so I think it really helps us to understand what happens in a variety of platforms, and I'm thinking about YouTube, I'm thinking Instagram, I'm thinking TikTok here, in terms of how people get their posts seen, and so how they can start to build those relationships. So understanding how the algorithms work, understanding how you can write content that will be accessed by short tail or long tail queries. So when people type in who does this sort of work, for example, how you can have your pitch written in such a way that the algorithm will pick up what you've written there, which is building on what Jonathan's was talking about earlier. So I think that's really important, understanding that. And there's a lot of material, again, on YouTube and other places online that can give you a pretty basic introduction to search engine optimization and the sorts of, but, you know, if you really want to go into it further, go and get some advice from really is that I think in the digital space, the advice that I would give to people is be generous with what you're sharing. So when you find links that you think might be of interest to particular people, share them, ping them. Feel completely free to contact people cold on LinkedIn or Twitter and say, oh, I've just read your piece, I'm really interested about it. Could we meet up virtually to discuss? Or, you know, can you point me in the direction of other material that you've written? I've made some connections with people all over the world because I've been generous in saying, I've seen you've posted this and this. I came across this, you might be interested in it. And that's been the opportunity to really start connecting with that person and building a relationship. And again, as I think Adam said right at the beginning, this is not transactional. This is about actually connecting with other human beings, getting to know them, learning from them, sharing your wisdom and expertise with them, and learning from what they can contribute to you, and building relationships over time. So I think be generous, share, learn how the algorithms work, and just have fun.
Thanks so much, Tanya. That's interesting, and really, I know that's kind of your thing. So I love how when you talk about it, your eyes just sparkle. There's a comment from Rob. Thank you so much. That maybe book chapter authors can make a brief video to share their knowledge in this other way as well. That's a great idea that we'll consider. Thanks for that one, Rob. Jonathan, how can a student studying in Australia get connected in the Middle East with the intention of finding a job? So this would probably be maybe with a student who has an Australian background, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and again, I think probably going back to Tanya's almost probably answered this. I think it's just connecting with people as early as possible, sharing information and adding value as well to your target network. If you as a student are writing really good quality content, it might be about something to do with the Middle East, or something that you're passionate about, or something that in the future you want to pursue, then if you're sharing that content or links or whatever it may be with the targeted people you're trying to get in front of or build that relationship with, that's probably your best bet digitally. Obviously, we always say, come here, visit the Middle East. I think that's great because you can come here, you can meet people, grab people for a coffee. That usually changes the relationship, definitely. I know coffee's been a recurring topic on this course, but still, and it's true, exactly as Abdullah said and Adam said, that coffee is a big relationship driver. It really is. So if you can jump on a plane and come to the Middle East, that will only help your course.
Great. There's a question related to healthcare as well. Angie or Madan, up to one of you. Is healthcare any different when it comes to networking than other disciplines?
Okay, so I would sort of, argue there are sort of two aspects to networking. So one is the more conventional soft skills, communication and leadership attributes, which are sort of likely similar across disciplines. And these are more people-oriented skills, sometimes it is enhanced or complemented, with the use of technology, might be virtual or social media. The second, of course, is more discipline-specific. And when it comes to healthcare, it's made up of very diverse disciplines, by itself. And when you start, talking, say, for example, that, I have been actually working in healthcare, trying to understand how to make or bring different health professional groups working together. really understanding these professional silos that exist within the healthcare profession. And there are still lots of gaps and challenges for us to understand. So it's important for us to actually understand how healthcare works first, and also these differences across the various healthcare subdisciplines, for example, medicine, nursing, dentistry, pharmacy, therapy, allied health, public health, social and welfare health workforce, and across primary care, across secondary care, across tertiary care, and how public hospitals and private hospitals work. So it's important to really understand these differences. And many of these groups in healthcare, they already have existing networks in place. For example, medical associations, nursing associations, and other healthcare associations like public health networks, healthcare and community groups, etc. So understanding where and what these networks are, and leveraging these networks for purposes of education, research, or business is actually vital first. And I would also say that there are actually different models of networking in healthcare. So one is a more established model, which we call as a practice activity network. For example, in Australia, we have the GP practice activity network, which is mainly a network across practitioners, and similar models, actually exist when it comes to nursing, when it comes to allied health. And there are a few novel models, for example, the study club model, a mentorship model, where students actually collaborate or work more closely with experienced industry partners. So the challenge, I think, which many of us would appreciate, is how to curate, such networking models, and how do we align this to cultural and local interests, for example, between Australia and the CAR countries, and also building a more interdisciplinary model. So just to actually this is what, we have been trying to do here at Flinders, and the work of Hussein and Vivian and the Australia Arab Collaborative. We are sort of working to enhance this interdisciplinary networking, and also to bridge between health, the hospital, the aged care sector, and along with more established areas like law, business, and government and industry.
Great. Thanks so much, Madan. Adam, we have a question to you. What are some of the advantages of being an Australian Arab and working in the Middle East?
Well, I'd be lying if I said that it hasn't helped me in my time in the region. I mean, it has helped to open doors. And there are a few reasons for that. I think being someone who was born and raised in Australia, there is a certain level of curiosity about us Australians. I mean, we are a unique species, I must say, in many respects. But then someone who comes from this region, whose family immigrated to Australia in the late 1800s, there is this sort of expectation that someone like me will have an affinity with the region from a cultural point of view. So what that means is that, when I'm dealing with people, when I'm talking, when I'm interacting, there's an expectation that that's just something which is a given. That's how, how we've been brought up. It's not about it being better or worse. It's just that there is more alignment, and there's more of, particularly, and as I mentioned before earlier on, about the importance of family and family ties. I think an understanding of that, if you have that heritage, it just naturally helps. And then you layer that with someone who has been educated and has worked some of his career in Australia, looking at how that can be brought to bear on certain situations in the region, situations where they may be dealing with issues for the first time, which are issues that have been dealt with in Australia years or decades ago. And so it's how do you bring that experience to help them to solve issues here in the most effective and expedient way.
Thanks so much, Adam. There's a question directed to either Jonathan or Adam. Is there a demand for Australian expertise in MENA for social sciences, psychology, for example, domestic and family violence, or child protection? Whoever wants to take that one.
Jonathan?
Well, I can very honestly say I have. Unfortunately, that is certainly not something within our expertise or specialism. So I'm sorry, Adam, but I'm going to hospital pass this back to you.
Okay, that's fine. Look, I have noticed in the past 5 years, at least, that there is more of a focus on mental health and on child protection, to the extent that, I've seen this here in the UAE, where the various ministries that deal with community development and social services are very actively and publicly saying, mental health is real. It's something which cannot be ignored or swept under the carpet. And if you have an issue in that space, here are the avenues or the channels that you can pursue to get help. Social services, when it comes to child protection, there is also more public discourse around that than I've ever seen. And I think that it's not because those issues don't exist here, it's just that culturally they have been taboo. And I think that, as the region evolves, as more and more people from different parts of the world come into the region, and as particularly the younger generation in the region who've gone out into the world and are now coming back into the region, all of these things put together mean that these two areas will become more prominent. Will they become widely discussed in the media like you see in Australia? In the short term, I don't think so. Medium to long term, possibly. What I can say is that the discourse is moving in the right direction, and that's what I do see.
Great. I hope that answers Nada's question. Thanks, Adam and Jonathan. Just going quickly back to Rosemary's response regarding the value of Australian MENA region charity lawyers networking. She responded, yes, definitely. The international dimensions of charity law and the insights that can be gained from the experience and perspectives of other jurisdictions cannot be overestimated, and many jurisdictions face similar challenges in relation to governance and regulatory frameworks. Charities across the globe face a plethora of new social, economic, and health challenges, so she definitely thinks that there's a great value in collaboration between Australian MENA lawyers, particularly given the cross-investment in charities between the regions and due to the importance of fostering shared understanding of the different charity law frameworks. And this is why she's very pleased to join Hussein in writing a book chapter on the two systems. And we're very happy to have you on board with that, Rosemary. And Rosemary also has a short video on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, where she talks a little bit more about this. You can check it out. This is just a reminder for you to go and subscribe to our new YouTube channel. And if you haven't participated in the live poll, please do. I'll now take this opportunity to thank all the speakers and our supporters for being online and for being a part of today. We couldn't have done this without you. And indeed, I think that the networks and the relationships that we've built across the globe for the past couple of years have, been very fruitful in showing, how we've come together today.